My name is Marcus LAROSA, and this is my skills training project. I'll aim to develop a functional golf swing which can be adapted to any task demands throughout the sport of golf. Golf, a game which can be so frustrating but so satisfying when you hit the right shot. The golf swing is the undisputed most integral part of golf and has been well documented within literature. Various types of swings of golf clubs are needed throughout a game and must be performed with perfection to achieve success. The manipulation of power and direction of the swing will be determined by the constraints placed on the performer, as well as the affordances within the environment during a game of golf. Research of physical determinants and golf swing biomechanics has proved that targeted conditioning and training improves performance in golf players. It was found that the main physical determinants which improve performance include strength, power, and musculotendinosus stiffness, with each of these affecting club head speed and carry distance. Another study also determined that ball positioning, transverse club angle, transition, and wrist control are key to the biomechanics of golf swings in terms of accuracy and power. Lastly, differing grip positions have also shown to have an influence on golf driving distance and accuracy, as it was found that a neutral to strong grip correlates with a lengthy and more accurate drive. A constraints-led approach aims to place emphasis on the learner's ability to attune or adapt to the performance environment. For example, a player who has just become attuned to their local golf course is unlikely to produce the same performance on a golf course overseas where wind, contours, bunker locations, etc. will all be different. Practitioners must consider the different contexts which a player may have to experience by manipulating constraints within the performance environment during practice. Through this manipulation, players can attune to their environment whilst creating deeper and more broad and attractive states of movement, which can be adapted to various contexts. This allows for the performer to create their own journey of self-discovery in the learning process, rather than one that is dictated by specific instruction. A constraints-led approach to training also grants an individual to have a higher chance of their intrinsic dynamics matching the task dynamics following the training program. Therefore, my training program will focus on the manipulation of specific constraints at each stage of the learning process, focus on self-discovery of functional movement patterns, and place emphasis on the hands-off approach to skill acquisition. The constraints-led approach is not the only approach which can be used to explain skill acquisition. Alternative theories such as Schmidt's schema theory and Fitts theory are relevant to this day and widely respected by practitioners in the field. Hence, they must be considered. Schmidt's schema theory put forward a mental framework that implies that the human brain has general motor programs stored, which are derived from past experiences of the individual. Specifically in motor control, the use of schemas implied that there are generalized motor programs for a given class of movement. It is proposed that the schema would not take as much space and would help explain the ability to perform relatively novel tasks. For example, in golf, a generalized motor program is used for all different types of shots and is slightly modified based off past experiences. In comparison to the CLA, Schmidt's schema theory is inaccurate or limiting because it presents schemas as a program which is resistant to large change, whereas in the CLA, motor skills are represented as dynamic and forever changing to the performance environment by means of constraints. Furthermore, Fitts' theory of motor learning introduced a three-stage model where each stage represented a cognitive phase an individual would be at during skill acquisition. It placed large emphasis on the importance of both feedback to enhance learning and practice scheduling. The three stages included cognitive stage, associative stage, and autonomous stage. This progressive model identified that as you progress through the stage, the amount of cognitive burden on the CNS becomes decreased. In comparison to the CLA, Fitts stages of motor learning place no importance on the influence of constraints in the perceptual motor landscape. This is a limiting element of the theory, as it doesn't attempt to clarify how sensory information influences skill acquisition. An external focus of attention is described as directing the performer's attention to the effect of action. Studies have shown an external focus of attention is more effective for performance during both practice and retention assessments in golf players. Throughout my practice program, I will use this external focus drill. During this drill, attention is focused on the direction at which a line on the ball is facing. A line is drawn on the ball directly across it, and then is placed in the direction which is on a slight angle. The performer is then asked to hit the ball with their swing in the same plane as the line. This allows the coach to gain a desired swing out of the performer without specifically asking them how to swing the club. Another concept which can be used during a hands-off approach to learning includes analogy learning. Analogy learning simply poses an idea to a performer in the form of an analogy. There will be two different analogies that will be implemented into training. Firstly, the performer will be asked to imagine they are cutting the tips of the grass with a scythe. This analogy helps the individual to perform a swing which isn't too low that it hits the ground before the ball, or too high that they miss the ball completely. And secondly, the performer will be asked to imagine that there is a rod between their wrist and the shoulder of their leading arm. This allows for the shaft angle that is more optimal for an accurate shot with no skew. Assessment 1 will test how far the performer can drive the ball. The performer will be given 5 opportunities to hit the ball as far as possible. The driver club will be used for all attempts. And the measures that will be recorded include carry distance, ball speed, and curve. Assessment 2 will be a quantitative test whereby the performer will be assessed on their ability to aim for different targets. The performer will be given specific targets to aim for, and the distance by which the ball misses will be noted by the top tracer technology, and the 4-iron club will be used. Now on to the transfer test. A transfer test is used as a tool which further proves the acquisition of skill. A transfer test consists of the performer being asked to perform the skill they've learnt under constraints which have never been presented before during training. This concept can be further explained using the perceptual motor landscape. If a positive transfer of skill has been acquired through a skillful performance of the transfer test, it demonstrates that the proximity of the next attractor state is closer. The transfer test for the golf swing will consist of the performer being asked to aim for a bucket placed 20 meters away. The distance away from the bucket will be measured as a transfer of skill. If the ball goes into the bucket, this will be recorded as 0 meters. In training week 1, the goals of the sessions were as follows. To understand optimal hand grip position, find comfortable feet placement for optimal swing stance, learn and discover weight transfer, create flexibility and functional torso rotation, learn to lower and rise the body in the swing. And the constraints added included changes to the surface where drills were performed on, concrete or grass, if there was a presence of a ball or no ball, holding different clubs including driver or 7-iron, and footwear if shoes or slides were worn. In training week 2, the goals of the sessions were as follows. Learning to manipulate angular velocity of the swing, start aiming for targets, produce long distance shots, try to produce functional swings with different golf clubs. The constraints added included using a tee or no tee, listening to music during practice, using driver, 4-iron and 7-iron, aiming for targets, aiming for max distance, and a spectator present, and the use of synthetic grass surface. In training week 3, the goals of the sessions were as follows. Focus on producing power through the swing for long distance shots, practice aiming for targets using different clubs, understanding which golf clubs should be used when aiming for different targets, perform golf shot on grass, and experimenting with different ball lie in the grass. The constraints added included using the 4-iron, 7-iron and 9-iron, aiming for targets, aiming for max distance, spectator present again, use of grass surface this time, wind being 20 kilometers per hour, different driving range, this time being at Warriewood, and manipulation of ball lie within the grass. In training week 4, the goals of the sessions were as follows. To produce a functional swing which can be adapted to any task demand placed upon the performer, including long distance straight drive, accurate chip, and mid-range shot. Produce a functional swing in a fatigue state. Learn to match equipment to task demands accurately, for example, which club for its corresponding distance. The Constraints added throughout these weeks included using a 4-iron, 7-iron, 9-iron, and driver, aiming for targets, aiming for max distance, spectator present, synthetic grass surface, and a fatigue stake, which was an individual constraint. And lastly, T versus no T. When comparing results from the baseline test and post-training assessment, carry distance increased from 124.4 metres to 155.8, and total distance increased from 136.9 metres to 206 metres following the training program. Ball speed increased from 167.8 km per hour to 197 km per hour following the training intervention. Curve was used to measure accuracy of the golf shot. Curve decreased from 20 metres to 12 metres following the training program. Lastly, the average distance from targets was recorded. Average distance from the target decreased by 10 metres, from 20 to 10 metres. Similarly, in the transfer test, the average distance from the bucket was recorded as 2.92 metres. The results showed that skill acquisition had occurred using the constraints-led approach to training. Specifically, accuracy and power of the golf swing had both improved, with further evidence of that shown by a decrease in curve or skew and an increase in ball speed. An increase in accuracy was caused by the manipulation of constraints and was shown through the target practice assessment as distances from the targets decreased. With the performer being asked to aim for specific targets under differing environmental and individual constraints, allowed for an improved accuracy of the golf swing. The main constraint which aimed to increase accuracy was the target practice. Target practice allowed for the variability in pitching distances and resulted in a variety of attractor state formations for different task demands. A positive transfer of accuracy skill was shown in the transfer test. However, interestingly, there was an increase in the second week of practice. This was likely due to the fact that skill acquisition isn't perfect and variation in results in early stages of practice are likely. Secondly, both an increase in power and accuracy was shown as measures in distance and carry distance increased. Specific behaviours emerged and were observed following the manipulation of constraints. Specifically throughout training, the performer was forced to train with different clubs. Use of a 7-iron, 4-iron, 9-iron and driver through practice allows for variations to be made throughout the performer's swing. Therefore, this variation in practice acted as a catalyst for learning how to manipulate power. This forced the performer to self-organize their movement patterns to match that of the task and the equipment used. Overall, this led to an increase in power produced in the swing. Lastly, environmental constraints such as surface type, equipment used, and social expectation through use of a spectator further contributed to the development of attractor states. Surface types were constantly exchanged between synthetic grass and normal grass throughout the training program and allowed for specific behaviour emergence. For example, synthetic grass is very forgiving to a player, as if you hit the ground before the ball, the club will bounce off and still allow for clean contact. However, on grass, this is not the case, as the club will dig into the ground and clean contact will not be achieved. Therefore, through the manipulation of this environmental constraint, it allowed for the development of a consistent movement patterns where the club had clean contact with the ball, regardless of the surface used. The constraints-led approach has also proved to be successful when coaching various sports and skills, including instances in the gym, when coaching the power clean movement. This study showed that the CLA to training created more successful lifts, along with a skill that is more robust under varying psychological and physical pressures. The training methods that were used in this study are similar to the methods I used. This therefore validates that a constraints-led approach to skill acquisition is effective and should be adopted by practitioners in the coaching field. Now on to the strengths and weaknesses of my skills training project. The sport of golf allowed for an effective manipulation of constraints. This is due to the nature of the sport and the various skills that are required to be successful. This was a strength of the training program, as the CLA could be integrated into training flawlessly, allowing for skill acquisition to occur. Another strength was that I had access to different environments through going to different driving ranges, which presented several environmental constraints. Furthermore, access to various golf clubs allowed for an effective manipulation of equipment, which was a vital element to my training and acquisition of the skill via the CLA. A limitation that must be noted was that I was not able to incorporate a transfer of skill or practice into a real game situation, which would have been the gold standard to test the skill acquisition of a golf swing, as it would determine my in-game performance. Furthermore, another limitation is that the equipment used was not tailored specifically to my personal characteristics, which may have affected results slightly. Overall, it was proven that the constraints-led approach is useful in the skill acquisition of a powerful and accurate golf swing. However, it is unclear if the skill acquisition is transferable to a real game situation in the sport of golf. This aligns with the original hypothesis that is using a constraints-led approach to training will result in the acquisition of skill, being the golf swing. Further studies should aim to train in a more sport-specific environment, such as a real golf course rather than a driving range. This will result in greater adaptability of the swing and greater real game situation performance.